created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Hello, hello. Today I am inviting you all to join me on this trip. I am inviting you to time travel to year 1950, Mexico City, to witness the first season where Maria Callas would be presenting in Mexico City. Her debut in Mexico City, 1950. Today's program is called The Expectation. 1950 Mexico City is called The Expectation for today's program. So, but before we get started, I wanted to also first give two messages. First message is from Opera We Love Singing, our deepest appreciation to the radio program Viva la Opera. Viva la Opera is a radio program that has been airing in a public radio FM radio station in Mexico for a good number of years already, and with the support of his host and producer Erick Zermeño, who very kindly and gently has shared some thoughts and anecdotes around Maria Callas in Mexico. So our deepest appreciation to Erick Zermeño and Viva la Opera for his collaboration in the ideas and some of the content for today's program. Of course, part of this trip will also be based on some other materials that are available, such as recordings that you can find in the internet somehow very easily, and other notes and journals that have published content around Maria Callas in Mexico. We will, in fact, be taking some of the comments from an interview that was made to the great Mexican tenor Rafael Sevilla. Rafael Sevilla is a tenor that I think he was not aware of it. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, and he may not be aware, but he taught me many things about the opera. So I have to thank him for the many things that he shared with me and helped me in building my understanding of this art. The reason why I am naming him is because some of the anecdotes or the content that we are sharing as well come from an interview that he had with one of the major local newspapers in Mexico. I really wasn't aware that he was present in the opening season of Maria Callas in Mexico. So I think his witness, his comments will also be very valuable. So that would be the first message. The second message is that I would like to dedicate this program to all the countries that are now following us as of this April year 2024. We have already surpassed 500 cities listening to the program. I am so very happy about that. And the reason why we would like to embark in this time travel, in this trip, is because we are aware that not everybody lives in New York City. And even if you live in New York City, it doesn't mean that you can actually afford a ticket to the Metropolitan Opera House. Same case for La Scala or the Covent Garden or La Opéra de Paris, which are the major opera houses in the world. Given technology, given a number of situations, given even the year that we were born, maybe the access to those opera houses are things that we cannot witness. And since we cannot witness, I would like you to live this trip to the first year when Maria Callas arrived to Mexico. That was her debut, 1950. And this trip is going to be called The Expectations. With no further introduction, let's start our trip. And as we are time travelers, of course we are in advantage when compared to the people who are now living in the 50s. Think of the TV in color in Mexico was not available yet. And so, as we are traveling back and forth, we have several advantages compared to people who are living there. We are now well aware of technology. Now, as we are traveling in time and as we are going to respect and we don't want to influence that timeline, we are not traveling with our smartphones. Therefore, and there is not in the 50s the technology to send our feed or publish updates in Facebook. There is no Instagram. There are no mobiles. The reality in those 1950s is very different to what we have now. So maybe in your mind as a time traveler, you have said several times, hey, how come that nobody recorded the all the presentations by Maria? How is it possible that many recordings are lost? Or why are the existing recordings so old? But that is your advantage because we are time travelers. You know that now. But in the time that we are traveling, the access to that technology was not that easy as it is now. Analog recording and reproduction, huge equipment that barely could people afford. Most likely only companies, radio and TV companies, would have access to those. And so there is a technology limitation. And I would like to invite you in this time travel to think that as we have reached the year 1950, this is a Mexico that still is growing up. The Palacio de Bellas Artes, the main opera house in the country, is important, yet, of course, not as important as it could be La Scala or the Met or the Covent Garden. It's still in the circuit of important opera houses, if not the top, being sincere. And why am I mentioning this? Because in this May 1950, we are going to be witnessing the arrival of Maria Meneghini Callas. And it is not just that I want to remark the last name of her husband, because we all know in the 1950s, we know that she's married to an Italian businessman, Mr. Meneghini. So Maria is known as Maria Meneghini Callas. So Meneghini arrives in the 1950s, and she arrives a little earlier than expected, which has caused some disruptions in the plans of the people in charge of the Opera de Bellas Artes those years. Of course, I am referring to Mr. Caraza Campos, the director of the Opera House, and Carlos Diaz Dupont, who will also be the major or the main witness of most of the anecdotes that could come later in regards to Maria Callas. Of course, there are other things that we need to know. We need to know that Maria Callas arrived on this trip along with Giulietta Simeonato, the very great Giulietta Simeonato, who had already been active for a number of years in Italy and other countries, is traveling now to Mexico for the same season along with the almost unknown Maria Meneghini Callas. Up to these 1950s, remember that we are in advantage as we are traveling back in time. We know a lot about the career of Maria, but as we come back to the year 1950s, we notice that people is not really aware of who this Maria is. Why is Maria Callas here? We have heard a few things about her, but nothing relevant. I mean, people are now used to listening to great singers, maybe Kurt Baum, the tenor in this season, who sings often at the Metropolitan Opera House, which of course means he's already a star. He's already at the peak of his career. But who is this Maria? We already know in these 1950s about Giulietta Simeonato. But who is this Maria Meneghini? And as we have this expectation and we know that we would like to arrive to this opera house, the Teatro de Bellas Artes, in this May 1950, as we arrive to this opera house, we notice that there is a huge announcement at the entrance of the theater. Just imagine that we are arriving to the opera house, and as we arrive, we notice at the front of it a huge, at night you can see it, a huge luminous announcement that reads that Maria Meneghini Callas is being welcomed to Mexico, and there is a very interesting statement in that announcement. She's announced not only as Meneghini Callas, but she's named La Soprano Absoluta del Siglo, which means La Soprano Absoluta. You may be aware that Soprano Absoluta is a term that's used in opera to refer to a soprano whose vocal capabilities allow her to sing pretty much any role that she wants. So maybe as we arrive, we are not sure who is informed. Why is this all this noise around the voice of the almost unknown Maria Callas? She has never been to Mexico. So we arrive because we are time travelers with a great expectation, because we will be able to listen to Maria, but we know who Maria will be. People in this theater do not know who Maria will be. So there is, yes, expectation in the air, but there is nothing but expectation. And of course, as people see that huge, immense announcement, massive announcement at the entrance, they start to be, like also in the same hype, as we would say nowadays. We as time travelers, we know what hype is used for now. And as we have time traveled, we are aware that people don't know that they will be witnessing one of the most important episodes in the history of the opera in Mexico. Those people who arrived in May to the Palacio de Bellas Artes, and now with time travelers among them, they don't know what they will be witnessing. And this is the first page of 3 consecutive years pages that will be imprinted in the memory of the opera in the country. So we have arrived and we have noticed this huge announcement. We see people in the corridors, people taking their seats, and we know we have arrived to the main room of the Palacio de Bellas Artes, and we know that we will be witnessing Norma. Please notice that again, as we are time travelers, we are at an advantage because we know that Norma will later be one of the iconic roles of Maria Callas. But people who are there, they don't know that the program that they are about to witness is one of the programs that will define the career of Maria. She would continue to rescue these bel canto roles, but not only for her, but also for us Mexicans. We have an advantage. Remember, we are time travelers, but the rest of the people in the main room do not know what, or if they are not really unaware of the opera, they are not that familiar with Norma. Before Maria Callas, very few singers would engage in singing this important role. So we as public, or we as time travelers with the rest of the public, we do not have the refinement in their understanding of the opera. Yet we are there. We are now keeping in mind that Maria Callas is a 26 years old singer. She is very, very young, and she's engaging, we don't know yet, she's engaging in one of the most difficult roles of the soprano tessitura. One of her greatest achievements that we are about to witness is a young 26 years Greek American soprano going for one of the most difficult roles for the soprano ever written. And as we are there and it has started, again, we are at the advantage because if we can read the comments and we can have access to books now written around those days, as we are in the room, we have as we are witnessing it for the first time along with the rest of the audience, we are not aware of the several difficulties that people will criticize later. People will criticize that maybe the sound of the voice of La Divina is not nice, that maybe she's overdoing too many things. Even we, now that we are in the same room with over 4,000 people, other 4,000 people adding to us being there, are listening for the very first time to a voice that has a difficult sound to grasp. And that difficult sound to grasp is not only to us who are used to listening to La Divina in recordings, it is happening the same to the people at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. People at the Palacio de Bellas Artes is not responding to Maria. Her entrance with the O sediziosi voce di guerra does not feel very comfortable. She goes for a casta diva that gets an applause, but people are not really touched. The duet with Simeonato, with Adalgisa, the interactions with Polione so far are just not working. You notice Maria is not comfortable in herself, so it is a moment throughout the first act of Maria, which by the way you may know it's much longer than the second one. It is around an hour and 30, and it is feeling like a little tiring. People are feeling tired of that voice that they cannot understand. That we have heard the quality of the high notes. A little unstable in some areas of the voices, but we notice the power of the voice, but yet she is not touching us. What we don't know is that in her arrival in that Sunday night in the 1950s, May, Carlos Diaz-Dupont, who picked her and Julieta at the airport, got a first impression. And so in his memories, Diaz-Dupont tells that his first impression of Maria is that of the stereotype, because we have stereotyped sopranos as huge, fat singers. And so he says, when I see Maria, I notice she has a beautiful face, but she has these huge, tremendous glasses covering her eyes. Not sure if you're aware, but Maria suffered of short sighting, so she wore heavy glasses. And so Diaz-Dupont, when he meets them at the airport, the first thing he notices is this woman has a beautiful face, yet those glasses look horrible on her. And she's stocky. She's not thin, she's not slim. Many people call her fat. So he sees her and hesitates in saying whether this Maria that arrived to the Mexico City airport will really be successful in the country. He himself has his doubts about it. People who are in the room, and now we know in the voice of the tenor, Rafael Sevilla, who is barely 15 years, and he's part of the support roles at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. He witnesses the arrival of Maria, and he himself says, I'm not surprised. I mean, her presence is not surprising. She has nothing that would call the attention. But Rafael Sevilla, during the rehearsals, says, she's a very diligent serious and calm person. That's what he tells us about Maria. He knows and he has heard that Maria's voice is not beautiful. Same comment as Diaz Dupont. Maria's voice is not beautiful, and we in the first act of Norma are witnessing that voice we are really not liking. But she has heard advice from Caraza Campos, and Caraza Campos knows that the Mexican public likes high notes. And so he advises to wrap up that first act of Norma with an E flat. Over the high C, a semitone higher, he asks to wrap with that high E flat. D flat, sorry. So she decides that as she is not conquering the public, she will allow herself to sing a note that is not written. And man, with the voice that Maria has those years, she sings that note, and the note we are about to hear is this. Of course, you can now understand the euphoria that created. We are listening to the orchestra full volume, because even though Norma is an opera with very light orchestration, at the end of the first act, Norma has a very heavy orchestration along with the voices of the choir and the super huge voice of Kurt Baum and the very powerful voice of La Simeonato. So we are witnessing something out of this place. And above all those places, those voices, we can hear Maria going for a note that is not written, and it has just caused an ecstasy in the house. So things would be different as we are witnessing now the second act. People are willing to give Maria an opportunity, as they loved the pyrotechnics that she had in the first act, sorry. As we are moving on with the second act, people are more willing to receive her voice. Still, this performance of Norma and the one that would follow days later would not be of any particular interest for people who studies Maria Callas' repertory in the future. We as time travelers know that these Normas that we have witnessed were interesting as the point of departure to Mexicans, but will not really leave a mark for the rest of the world and for the rest of the studies on Maria. We notice now that we will continue in our time travel, and we will now listen to Maria singing Aida. Aida, this very important role by Maestro Giuseppe Verdi, will be sung by this very young, 26 years old Maria. And now let me share something with you, because of course we are going to be talking about that E flat, even higher than the D flat that we just heard in Norma. We are going to hear to a E flat that will go and will be, for the history of opera in Mexico, will be a milestone. Now it is time to share with you that you have noticed that Simeonato and Kurt Baum will be part of the cast along with Callas, with Meneghini Callas in that season in Mexico. But truth is, she has had some problems with Mr. Baum. Kurt Baum, a German tenor who resides in the US, is somehow tough to deal with, and he is already known by the Mexico audience. So if you have to put people to decide whether to choose Kurt Baum's side or Maria's, most likely they would go for Kurt, and Kurt Baum knows it. And he is the type of tenor, and you can hear it in the recordings, don't trust me, just listen to the recordings. Kurt Baum is the type of tenor who likes to show off, who does things for fan service, who likes to show that he can keep a note for a second longer than his partner on the stage, that he can sing louder, that his voice is above all the others. And he's not the only tenor who does that. But he does it, and it has worked for him. And people know it, and people know that Maria will have a great challenge in facing Mr. Baum now in Aida. And Kurt Baum is, of course, not willing to cede not a single step to give the applause to Maria. Kurt Baum, for what we can read, for what we can hear in the recordings, most likely has taken it personal and has decided to take the soprano down. Of course, we as time travelers know that the memory of Maria Callas will be 100 times more important to the career that we know about Kurt Baum. But Kurt Baum in the 50s doesn't know it. He thinks he can beat Maria Meneghini down, he being a mature tenor, a well-known tenor in the country, and with a voice more than adequate for the role of Radames in Aida. So truth is that things are very tense there. And truth is that Maria is very, very upset at Kurt. And truth is that Kurt is not willing to cede to Maria. So, and let me share this with you. The relationship on stage between sopranos and tenors, it is not the exception that Maria, the soprano, and Kurt, the tenor, did not get along well, is not an exception. That is more than common that you may think. But this dispute or this lack of understanding on the stage between Maria and Baum will end up in creating this page of history, because Maria has already been suggested by Callas Campos, who has invited her and Simeonato to have a dinner at Callas Campos' house, and that's where he tells her the anecdote of Ángela Peralta, known as the Ruiseñor Mexicano, a very important soprano of the past century, who built a very impressive career and who sang an E flat in that same opera at the end of the concertante of the second act. Maria is reluctant to do it. We are, as time travelers, we know it. We know that happens. We in the 50s and the rest of the public do not know it. But they know that they are just going to witness an Aida. But we now, time travelers, know that Callas Campos, in that invitation that he had with Maria and Simeonato, has shared this anecdote because he suggests, Maria, if you want the public of Mexico to be at your feet, you need to do something like this. You need to do something so impressive that people will never forget. We know that her initial reaction was that of denial. She said, that's not artistic, that's not even written, that's going to sound awful. Of course, no, I'm not going to do it. But if you ask me as a time traveler, I would tell you that Callas Campos knew very well the psychology of sopranos in general, and sorry for the stereotype, and I think that he could read Maria very well. He knew that Maria needed to do something very impressive, because remember that Maria is still Meneghini Callas. She is not La Divina. He knows she has the potential. He knows she will be a great opera star, but the truth is that she is still not yet. And as she is still not yet, he's offering her a way to achieve it. And the way to achieve it is to sing that note. So, Maria lives with Simeonato, Callas Campos, with the idea of not doing it. But on the day of the performance, Kurt Baum and Maria are doing even worse than in the rehearsals. He's on purpose keeping and showing off more than before, and so Maria if you ask me, it is now feels like an excuse, because now I think Maria is using Kurt Baums as an excuse to justify to go for that E flat. The very first time that Maria sang, and the final, because she did it only in Mexico, the only times she could sing that E flat in Mexico, she decides to go for it. We know in the witness of Carlos Diaz Dupont that when she decides to go for it, because she says, again, it is me speaking, as a justification, she's justifying herself by saying that she's so fed up of Kurt Baum that she's going to do it. So she asks for the permission of the rest of the singers, who say, Giulietta Simeonato said, if you're going to do it, go ahead. The orchestra director says, okay, go for it. So with no objections, of course, Kurt Baum has already learned about it as well. So Kurt Baum says, if Maria Meneghini goes for the E flat, I will go myself. And she goes for it. And if you know the concertante in the second act of Aida, you know that we also have a huge volume. We as time travelers, we are witnessing the tremendous volume of the orchestra. We are witnessing the tremendous volume of the choir. We are listening to the two singers going off and for the beef, for the beats that are sung in those interactions. We are listening to the huge voice of Giulietta Simeonato, and then we listen to this. And people goes mad. Of course people goes mad. We have just heard a note that many people do not know what note that was. They know it was a higher note, a very high note, but we have just heard it above the orchestra, above the choir, and above the other singers. Nobody even notices that Kurt Baum is trying to reach that note. So the Opera House, the Teatro de Bellas Artes, and we as well, because we have time traveled to witness this, are out of our minds. You can listen to it in the applause. People are really out of their minds. And we will know later that Maria, when she refers to this episode, she says, of course they are applauding to me. Baum was singing in falsetto. Nobody even noticed he was singing that note. It was the public was rendering to me. Would be a very proud Maria Callas knowing what she had done. So it appears that the objections of, this is not very musical, well, I need people to approve, was just an excuse. The excuse he used with his bad understanding with Tenor Baum, and with Tenor Baum being the excuse for this behavior, we think that we maybe should take some seconds to talk about a little more about Tenor Baum. Just try to put ourselves in the shoes of Tenor Baum. You are a tenor who has come to Mexico for a good number of years already. Well, not good number, but you have come to Mexico several years already, and people love you. So why would you cede to a newcomer? Why would you cede to a young singer, a singer who has not even sung, not even a tenth of what you have sung? And you're a tenor, you're a Kurt Baum, you have these huge egos that we know most tenors have. So why would you cede? Why would you cede to this singer that you see as pretentious? If you try to put yourself in Kurt Baum's shoes, you may understand him. Let's close these anecdotes by saying that, of course, Baum really got mad at Maria and said he would never be singing with Maria again, and threatened, menaced her, that she would never be able to sing in the US as well. But we are still in the 50s, And we know that Il Trovatore is the next title to be presented by Maria. But we know, and we are in the Palacio de Bellas Artes room, and we are having a hard time in really getting it from her. Maria does not look comfortable in the role. We are watching her performance, and we are some travelers know that as you read people who were in the same performance, just tell us that Maria was not really there, and as we are listening to her, we are having a hard time in getting why is she singing some parts as if she was Macbeth. There is maybe too much voice for Leonora. We see Maria struggling at some parts, even for some people in the later years would call her vulgar. She's even being vulgar in the role of Leonora. So she does the job. There are, we notice, time travelers, we know there are some fragments of those 1950 Trovatore, but there is nothing that we can say very positive about that, except for the fact, of course, that we are witnessing the arrival of who later would be known as La Divina. But we time travelers, we are sincere. We know she's still not there. Still, we are surprised to discover that she sings the cavatina right after, in the final part of the opera. After the Miserere, sopranos usually cut the cavatina known as d'Italia Amor. D'Italia Amor, that one that is usually cut, so don't be surprised if you don't know it. So Maria decides to sing it. Remember that Maria, in the expectation of building a career, is willing to do anything. She has sung a D flat in Norma, she has sung an E flat in Aida, and now she has sung d'Italia Amor that is usually cut. And she sings with huge power. Again, we are having trouble in understanding whether it is Leonora or if it is Lady Macbeth. So with nothing else to remember, we are getting ready to leave 1950s, but we are going to witness now her Tosca. As Baum was very upset, he is not going to be in Tosca. We have Mario Filippeschi. And guess what? We are now, as time travelers, again at advantage because we know that Tosca is a role that Maria would sing for many years. But people in those years don't know that was going to be the case. And provided that we have witnessed that Maria was not really there, was not really comfortable with her Norma, not really her comfortable in her Trovatori, somehow well in her Aida. So we're somehow reluctant to her Tosca because we have witnessed very good Toscas. Remember that our Palacio de Bellas Artes has received many of the greatest singers of the opera world. So we know there are great Toscas, and we listen to Maria's Tosca still saying, well, is this going to be like Il Trovatore? And to our surprise, Filippeschi and Norma give us a very good version of Tosca. We are very satisfied. Filippeschi is a very good tenor. Filippeschi seems to understand Maria. Maria is not overdoing as she has overdone some things in her Aida. We notice he's working hard in her in keeping focus on the Tosca that she will build for years to come. We are now witnessing the first Tosca that she sang that pointed in the right direction of what years later would be the great Tosca that she was. Of course, we are very satisfied. We have applauded. Maria refers to a 5 minutes applause, which in fact was not a 5 minutes. We know that Maria has a tendency to exaggerate. So she exaggerates and says that the applause was a 5 minutes for her Visidarte. We applauded long, but it was not 5 minutes. But who cares? We loved her Visidarte. She put her heart in her Tosca. and we loved it. And so we need to come back in time to our present and leave these 1950s with the sensation that we have witnessed and that we know things that people who worked there did not know. We have witnessed the debut of who later would be known as La Divina. We have witnessed three of her most important roles on her career. We have witnessed her Norma, her Aida, and her Tosca. She, the announced as La Soprano Assoluta del Siglo at the entrance of the theater, has proved in just a couple of weeks that she can sing Norma, a belcantista role, Aida, a heavy Verdian role, a Trovatore, more in the bel canto style of Verdi, and she has given us Puccini, the verismo of Puccini in Tosca. In a way, she has proved she was La Assoluta. She has sung a good variety of roles that many sopranos are not able to do. And before we end our trip today, I would like to give some thoughts on Antonio Caraza Campos, the director of the Palacio de Bellas Artes. He certainly was a visionary. He knew, based on information, that he received this information from an agent that he had in Argentina who had seen Maria and who said, Antonio, you have to bring her to Mexico. That's how Maria arrives to Mexico. By the notice of this agent in Argentina, who passed the message to Caraza, and Caraza, being a good visionary, brings the soprano that he knows will build an outstanding career. Maybe he didn't know he would witness La Divina, who would later be La Divina. Had it not been for Caraza Campos, that would have not happened. And we have Carlos Diaz-Dupont, author of one of the books of the history of opera in Mexico, he who had witnessed, who had been part of many of the works, the artistic works behind many of the most important performances at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. He didn't know that all the anecdotes that he would keep would remain in the history of opera in Mexico forever.
We're posting more content in our profile in Coffee. You can find us there as Opera We Love Singing, all in one word. So go to Coffee, K as in key, O as in opera, dash, F as in food, and I as in ice. We love to see you there.